My crazy stepmom couldn't handle the fact that my dad left back his entire estate under my name instead of the kids she brought into the family who wanted nothing to do with him despite his constant efforts. So she stole the keys to my house and tried to break into the place. But oh boy, even I was shocked when I found out this is what dad planned for her.
Hi.
So I, 24, female, am writing this incident which happened to me recently. I come from a pretty wealthy background with my father being a movie producer. We live in a small country by the ocean, so there is a good chance my dad isn't that well known internationally. My 48-year-old dad, let's call him Theo, had met my mother when they both were my age, 24, and got married after she got pregnant with me. Unfortunately, due to some unforeseen complications during pregnancy, my mother passed away right after giving birth to me. My dad had been a single parent since then for almost 10 years. No doubt, he got a lot of offers from very attractive women, but he always prioritized me over his personal relationships. My dad had amassed a lot of wealth during his initial years, and so we shifted to a more film-centered city. When I was 12, I had a lot of trouble settling into the new school because of bullying. There were 2 guys in my grade who daily used to make fun of me because of how I was dressed. My dad dressed me, and the limits were crossed when they accidentally pushed me down 2 stairs. My dad was called to the school, but didn't meet the bullies or their parents because of his hectic schedule. My dad had always been there for me, but he wasn't able to be present much due to his hectic job, and so he decided to send me back with my grandparents at least till I was able to adjust to a new setting. My grandparents have been absolute angels and have raised me like I was their own child. My dad did come back on holidays and other family events, but that's all I saw of him for the next 6 years. So it is safe to say that I grew distant from him. I started to realize something was fishy when I heard my grandparents whisper about something that was related to my father. I was 15 doing this, so I directly confronted them and asked about the issue in hopes that it was about my dad finally taking me back with him. That is when my grandparents told me that my dad had married this woman he met during the shooting of a show. They told me my dad and the woman, let's call her Lisa, eloped the day before and were going to visit us. I wasn't pleased with this because my dad started a new family after abandoning me, but because I didn't have any say, I pouted it and waited for them to come. Lisa had a very off vibe from the moment she stepped inside my grandparents' home. I could feel all her pretentious behavior of being very kind towards me, but just for the sake of my dad. I was glad at that moment that I didn't live with my dad anymore. On talking further, it was revealed that she was a divorcee with 2 kids who I might get to meet if I ever visited my dad's mansion. My dad did ask me if I wanted to leave with him because I was old enough now, but I outrightly denied it, feeling hurt and abandoned by him, and so they left. Later on, talking with my grandparents, I realized we all had the same instinct about her to be nice. Anyway, that was over, and I completed my education in my grandparents' town. I worked extremely hard at school in order to get into film school and was able to get into the best one along with a few others. But the problem was that it was in the city where my dad and his family lived. I was happy on my own and was fine with my grandparents, but I fear that if I went to my preferred college, I would have to face restrictions from my dad. I have always had an interest in technical jobs at the set, basically camera work. Once my dad got to know that I had been selected in the best college in his city, he was ecstatic to have me back home. I did make it clear to him that if I stayed in the city, I didn't wish to be kept tabs on by him or his family at all times, to which he agreed. I was still doubtful on my grandparents' repeated requests. I decided to join the course. My dad invited me to his home, which at first I denied, but on repeated insistence from both him and Lisa, I decided to give them a visit. When I reached my dad's mansion, by the looks of it, it didn't look like I ever lived there. The walls were full of pictures of Lisa with her kids and some of my dad. Dad looked pretty thin and pale, so I was concerned about him. My dad offered to pay my fee and asked me to stay at their place for as long as I wished, but I said numbers I didn't wish any pity funds from him. I applied for a student loan and got into the college dorm. As I was about to leave in the afternoon, I met Lisa's kids who were just back from their acting coaching classes. I got the biggest shock of my life when I realized they were the kids who had bullied me when I was young. I wanted to tell my dad about it, but to be honest, I didn't really know him or his response. So I called my grandparents and told them about this. They told me I had done the right thing by not telling this to my dad because it had now been a few years to his and Lisa's marriage, and there was a good chance it might spoil my relationship with him. I obliged and talked to the bullies, James and Jake, both 24, male for formality's sake, and left as soon as I could. I had heard about the shenanigans of Jake and James from my grandparents. Apparently, their biological father was a rich businessman who didn't wish to leave his kids, but Lisa somehow decided to blame him for domestic violence and brought the kids into her new marriage. My dad didn't wish to have any more kids, but agreed to it for Lisa. He had known Jake and James since they were 15, and they had never failed to remind my dad that they weren't his children. He used to provide them with everything he could afford only for them to berate him to his face in front of their relatives, and these two were also a reason why I was kept away from my dad. Lisa should have tried to calm things down and explain to them the new dynamics, but she couldn't care less about it all, and it overall affected my dad. Their relationship has been dicey since the beginning, but after having me in the city, my dad finally felt he had someone he could trust. He had indirectly mentioned to me here and there about how his relationship with Lisa was. He said that she spends a good amount of money he makes in the name of promoting her kids, which he feels isn't true. I didn't wish to interfere in their relationship, so I decided to stay quiet and listen to him rant. After leaving my father's house, the feeling of anger and injustice kept burning inside me. I knew I should have told him everything, but at the same time, I couldn't bear the thought of ruining what little relationship we had left. But as the days went by, that decision weighed heavier and heavier on me. After all, I was his daughter, the only one who truly cared about him, while Lisa and her children were just draining his life and wealth, without any regard for the man my father was. 2 months later, I got an unexpected call. My father had been hospitalized. I couldn't get many details over the phone, but I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, I found Lisa sitting in the waiting room, pretending to be concerned. I knew she didn't really care. Her kids weren't around, and I wondered where they were since, according to Lisa, they were so close to my dad. As soon as the doctor allowed visitors, I went in to see my dad. He was lying there, pale and weak. My heart broke seeing him like that, so different from the strong man I once knew. He could barely speak, but he made an effort to say something. "I'm sorry for everything." Tears welled up in my eyes, but before I could respond, Lisa walked into the room with that fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, dear, you're here already?" she said, her voice sugary and insincere, which only irritated me more. "Your father's feeling a bit better, but the doctors say he needs a lot of rest. I think we should leave him in peace for now." I stepped back, feeling my blood boil. I decided that as soon as he was feeling better, I would tell him everything. It was time for him to know who Lisa and her children really were. That night, I stayed at the hospital late, but Lisa insisted I go home, saying she would take care of everything. Reluctantly, I left for my dorm, but I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I returned to the hospital early, only to find my father's room empty. I asked a nurse in a panic, and she informed me that he had been discharged earlier that morning on Lisa's orders.
How could that be?
He was barely able to speak the day before. And why had she taken him out without telling me? Something was terribly wrong. I rushed to the mansion, and when I arrived, the scene I found made my blood run cold. Lisa was lounging by the pool, laughing with her sons, Jake and James, as if nothing was wrong, as if my father wasn't on the verge of death. I stormed into the house, desperate to find him, and found him lying in a bedroom upstairs alone, visibly weak and disoriented.
Dad.
I cried, trying to wake him. He slowly opened his eyes, confused. "Why did she take you out of the hospital? You need medical care, not to be left alone while she's having fun with her kids." He shook his head as if he didn't know what was happening. Then I heard Lisa's laugh coming from the hallway. I was consumed by a rage I had never felt before. I marched towards her and started questioning her. "Why did you take my father out of the hospital? He needs care, and you're here acting like everything is fine." Lisa, unfazed, stood up slowly and faced me with that cynical smile on her face. "Oh, dear, he'll be fine. No need to overreact. Besides, you know how stubborn he is. He wanted to come home." I knew she was lying, And that was the last straw. I decided then and there to visit the family lawyer because something told me there was much more going on than I realized. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, I was met with news that left me speechless. Lisa had been trying to alter my father's will. She had convinced my father, in his weakened state, to sign documents that transferred a significant portion of his assets to her and her children. The anger I felt now was uncontrollable. Lisa was trying to steal everything, the legacy my father had built with so much effort, and that included what was rightfully mine. But I wasn't going to let it slide. Without her knowing, the lawyer confided in me that my father had left a clause in his original will. Any changes made under suspicious circumstances would automatically be null and void. Armed with this information, I returned to the mansion with a plan. I knew Lisa would try to hide what she was doing, so I started gathering evidence discreetly. I began recording conversations she had with Jake and James, where it was clear they were just waiting for my father to die so they could take everything. I knew that as soon as he passed, they wouldn't hesitate to kick me out and take control of everything. But before they could continue with their plan, something unexpected happened. My father, already very weak, had a moment of clarity and called me to his room. "I know what Lisa was doing," he said, his voice faint but determined. "I was too weak to fight, but you need to stop this." He gave me his blessing to take any necessary action, and at that moment, I knew there would be no more hesitation. I gathered all the evidence I had and took it to court. The legal battle was long, but in the end, justice prevailed. Lisa's attempt to steal the inheritance was exposed, and she and her children were disinherited. The final shock came when I found out that, in addition to losing access to the fortune, Lisa had racked up debts with failed investments and was now bankrupt. She, who had once flaunted her luxurious lifestyle, was now living with distant relatives, utterly ruined. As for me, over time, my father and I managed to rebuild part of the relationship we had lost. He passed away a few months later, but not before knowing that his wishes had been respected and that I would not let his memory be tarnished by the selfish interests of people who never truly cared about him. Lisa tried to appeal several times, but she failed every time. Each new defeat was a confirmation that justice, finally, had been served. After the legal battle ended, I felt an immense sense of relief, but also a heavy responsibility on my shoulders. My father's legacy was now in my hands, and I was determined to protect and honor it, not just for him, but for myself. I knew I couldn't let what happened define me. I had to rise above it, build something greater, and show everyone, including myself, that I was more than just a daughter fighting for an inheritance. I was a woman capable of making my own path. I threw myself into learning everything I could about business and investments. I attended seminars, sought advice from financial advisors, and immersed myself in books about wealth management and entrepreneurship. Every move I made was calculated, grounded in the principles my father had shown me. Work hard, trust your instincts, and never compromise your integrity. I didn't want to rely solely on what my father left behind. I wanted to build on it, make it even greater.
And it worked.
My investments started to grow. I bought into promising startups, invested in technology, and soon I was making more money than I ever expected. What started as a modest portfolio turned into a multi-million-dollar empire. I had diversified into real estate, the stock market, and even started my own production company in honor of my father's work in the film industry. But success wasn't just about money. Through this journey, I found something much more valuable: my own sense of self-worth. I learned that I was capable, strong, and resourceful. I no longer felt like the abandoned daughter or the girl left in the shadows by a stepmother who sought to erase me from my father's life. I had created my own identity, one built on resilience and determination. Amid all of this, I met the love of my life. At first, I was skeptical, afraid that my wealth would attract the wrong kind of attention. But he proved me wrong. He didn't care about my bank account or the companies I owned. He cared about me, the person I had become. We connected on a deep level, sharing values of respect, love, and a vision for the future. He was the kind of man who didn't just stand beside me in success, but held my hand in times of doubt. He was my rock. Our relationship blossomed, And soon after, we got married in an intimate ceremony. It was simple, yet perfect, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. I realized then that love wasn't about grand gestures or material things. It was about having someone who saw you for who you truly were, someone who supported your dreams, and with whom you could build a life of meaning and fulfillment. When I found out I was pregnant, it was like the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The excitement of bringing a new life into this world was overwhelming, and I knew this was my chance to break the cycle. I vowed to give my child the kind of love and stability that I had longed for as a little girl. My child would never feel neglected, abandoned, or unworthy. They would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally and supported in every step of their journey. I started preparing for the baby with joy and anticipation. My husband and I created a nursery filled with warmth and care, choosing everything ourselves, from the smallest details to the larger items. This child would grow up surrounded by love, in a home where they would feel safe and cherished. Every day, I thought about the kind of mother I wanted to be: present, caring, and nurturing. I wanted my child to have everything I didn't have growing up. Meanwhile, Lisa's life was unraveling. She had burned through what little money she had left after the court ruled against her, and her poor financial decisions kept piling up. She tried to maintain her former luxurious lifestyle, but without my father's money to support her, it quickly fell apart. Jake and James, her sons, had drifted away, pursuing their own selfish lives, leaving her to face the consequences of her greed alone. I heard rumors from distant relatives that Lisa had fallen into debt, moving from place to place, begging for help from anyone who would listen. But no one wanted to be associated with her anymore. Her bitterness and resentment were too much to bear, and she spent her days complaining about how life had treated her unfairly, still accusing me of stealing what was hers. She claimed I had manipulated my father into leaving everything to me, though everyone who knew the truth understood that my father made his decisions with a clear mind. It became almost laughable. Lisa, who had once lived in luxury, now reduced to nothing, clinging to a past that never really belonged to her. She was so consumed by her anger that she couldn't see the truth. Her downfall was her own doing. I used to feel angry at her, at how she tried to take everything from me and manipulate my father. But now I felt nothing. Lisa no longer held any power over me. Her words, her complaints, her accusations, they meant nothing. I had built a life so far beyond what she could touch. I was no longer that vulnerable girl who had been pushed aside. I was a successful businesswoman, a loving wife, and soon to be a mother. Lisa's downfall was her own, and I had no reason to concern myself with her fate anymore. She added nothing to my life, and her bitterness was her own burden to carry. Today, I focus on the future, not the past. I look forward to raising my child with the love and care that every child deserves, alongside a man who loves and respects me. Together, we're building a life filled with joy, purpose, and hope. My father's legacy lives on, not just through the wealth he left behind, but through the lessons I learned from him about strength, perseverance, and integrity. Lisa may continue to live in the shadow of her own mistakes, but I've stepped into the light. The life I've built is mine, shaped by my choices, my resilience, and my determination to create something beautiful out of the pain of the past. And now, as I await the arrival of my first child, I know that the future holds nothing but possibility, love, and a new beginning.